Been a godsend for us when it comes to breaking down a lot of the news about television and conferences and realignment and expansion and all that other stuff. Joins us. It's been too long on Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports. Bob, thank you very much for your time. How's your shoulder?
My shoulder's well. I'm hitting a few golf balls. Right now I'm actually in Maine, enjoying some fall weather. This was the last state in the U.S. I haven't been to. So I knocked them all off just shy of my 65th birthday.
Did you have rotator cuff?
I did.
I had that back in 15, and I remember I couldn't do anything golf, and I just got a 7-iron out around the greens about 2 or 3 months later and just started chipping a little bit. They allowed me to do that. But good luck with you on your comeback from that and getting back on the golf course. What did you think? What did you think of Jimmy Pitaro and his comments about ESPN saying that they're flexible with its rights to the college football playoffs?
I think it was pretty smart on his part. You know, they really need to. They're the key for the CFP to expand earlier than 26, and by him showing a willingness to, go ahead and have discussions now about. Maybe potentially letting some other partners in going forward, or at least through the end of the existing deal, I think was a good olive branch on their part. Pretty clear, though, that he still is going to want going forward, the semis and the champ game. And I'm not sure that's going to be possible.
Bob, what do you think the ultimate, will it be sharing with Fox, and how long do you think that takes to get worked out if they don't want to share the semis and champ game or rotate that like the Super Bowl?
Well, what I could see happening is, maybe Fox coming in 24, 25. I think next year is going to be tough, but 24, 25, and maybe doing some of the first round games, the 4 games that I guess would be the highest rated or the lowest rated, conference champions, the quarterfinals. And then, maybe some split of the New Year's Day bowl games, and then ESPN retaining the semis and the finals through the end of their existing term. I think, and during those 2-3 years, there'd be a negotiation going forward. And I would imagine that Fox is going to push for some sort of a split. And I would guess, some other networks come in as well. But I think at the end of the day, the 11 games could be split pretty evenly between Fox and ESPN, with some sort of rotation on the semis and the final, similar to what TNT/TBS and CBS have when it comes down to the NCAA basketball finals, which has worked pretty well for both parties.
Bob, did you think that the expansion was inevitable, or did you think there was a real chance they could have hunkered down and waited out this contract?
I think the presidents got tired of the commissioners not being able to come up with something. Mm-hmm. I think the presidents all realized that, there has been some infighting. There's a little bit of distrust at the commissioner level amongst each other right now. And I think it was smart of the commissioner or the presidents to come in and say, this is what we're going to do. This is when we want to do it by. Now you guys go figure it out. And so the good part is that's been settled. And I think it was smart. Everybody wanted expansion. It just kind of got bogged down at the commissioner level. Now it gets kicked over to, Bill Hancock and the folks at the CFP. And, those guys are masters at the whole logistical aspect of these things, which is a huge part of it, especially if you want to start early, looking at, existing championship games, how the six New Year's Day bowls rotate, how they're going to be incorporated into things. So now it really falls on to somewhat with the commissioners, but primarily to Bill and his group to pull the whole thing off.
How much more now that there will be what looks like 8 teams additional to the 4 that are a part of the playoff now? How much more money per year are we talking about?
Well, if you look at it this way, right now they're paying probably in this existing deal for the semis and the 4 New Year's Day bowl games and the champ game around $700 million. That's the average. It's a 12-year deal. So $700 million in average. They're year 9, say it's at $800 million. You add 4 more games in say 2 years, that gets it up to, 950, 960 million a year. And then if it actually goes to the open market, a double is only a double gets you to 2 billion. And I think that's very, very doable. You got to remember, it's a 12-year deal. So it's kind of stale, it's kind of old. And just look at what the Big Ten just did. I mean, they tripled. And so to see something like that, I've seen numbers from $1.6 billion to 2.2. I'm kind of staked right in the middle, 2.0 as an average. It might start a little less than that, but over the course of especially if it's like a 10-year deal, I think you can get to 2 billion average easy.
How much of that is split up among the schools that are who are the Power Fives compared to the Group of Fives? How is that? Do you know how that's kind of distributed?
I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like I want to say 65% were the Power Five. The Group of Five split like 25%. Notre Dame gets a chunk, and then there's parts held out for the participating schools who are in the playoff. So I'm sure, that's something that's going to have to be tweaked. That was the old model. So I think that something's there'll be some tweaking, but that gives you a rough idea of kind of how it works.
Bob, given the news that the Pac-12 and ESPN might be distant, hundreds of millions apart, is that good news for the Big 12? What does that really mean? Does it mean they could maybe cut in line in this?
The funny thing to me was, when it said hundreds of $millions, and I was like, well, the deal is only going to be worth about 300. So how far can they be apart? But then if you look at it, say over 5 years, the term of the deal, and if ESPN was at 200 and the Pac-12 is at 300, and so that's 100 million over 5 years, that's hundreds of $1 million, $500 million difference. So I think it was a message from ESPN to the Pac-12 that, hey, we're a long ways apart. And I also think it was a message to the Big 12, which was, we're going to be here to talk to you soon. And so, the fact that Brett Yormark has opened the TV negotiations, even though it's not within the exclusive window, but he's apparently having some discussions with ESPN and Fox, I think it bodes well for the Big 12. And I think they were smart to be in the market at the same time the Pac-12 is, so that, they have a chance at, working something out on a parallel path, at the same time the Pac-12 is in an effort to get their deal done.
When you say, even though it's not during the exclusive window, what does that, you can still talk? Exclusive window means you're only talking to those you already have an agreement with?
Right. The way the deals are usually structured is there's an exclusive window with the existing partners that triggers, 18 months out, let's say, anywhere between a year to 18 months out. And at that point, you can only have discussions with your existing partners, and it's a required negotiation. Now, prior to that, which is in the phase they are right now, because that deal still has a couple of years to run on it, they can talk, and no one has, there's no clock ticking. So, there's no pressure on the network. There's really no pressure on the conference. It's, they can talk and see where everybody's head's at. They get a deal done, and great. If they don't, they just continue down the road, and sooner or later they will get to that exclusive window, and it'll have to be triggered at some point so that the conference can, either get a deal done for sure or take it to the open market.
I have a question. I've seen you use this before, and your Twitter feed is phenomenal. The trade bait or the nuggets or the chips that might be traded, let's just say the ESPN is working with the Big 12. But they also are trying to get whatever may happen with Texas and Oklahoma, whether it's a year or two early. What would be the most valuable thing the Big 12 could get, other than exit money, whatever that is, from ESPN for any kind of early trade?
I would think an extension at a decent rate would be the best thing that the Big 12 could get from ESPN. There's going to be some money, there's no doubt, because it's a benefit to Texas and to OU and to ESPN and the SEC for them to get there, and there's a cost or a loss to the Big 12 and to ESPN, because they have those games right now in the Big 12, and to Fox, who also has those games in the Big 12. I mean, that game Sunday, Alabama, Texas, that was 10 million viewers.
Mm-hmm.
That's like Fox's third or fourth highest game, only behind Ohio State, Michigan game. So they don't want to see them leave early. So there's going to be, a lot of people are going to have to be made whole in that type of a deal. But the more chips you have out there that you can, play with, the easier it is to get some of these deals done. The only problem is there's got to be willing partners on all sides to make something like this happen because they're very complicated. But there's more trades that go on in the sports media business than you might think. It's not unusual. And sometimes the more complicated the deals are easier to get done because there's more moving parts that you can use as trade fodder.
What about the Longhorn Network?
Toast. I mean, I don't know that does anything. I mean, I guess they could leave it with the Big 12 and it becomes the Big 12 network. My understanding is ESPN is looking forward to folding it into the SEC network and having it go away. So there's no reason to run a parallel network, and I don't think the SEC is going to allow it. And I think that Texas is aware of that. But, it might be of value to somebody else, maybe for the big, I'm not even sure of the distribution, but it may be primarily just Texas, but it could be of some value to the Big 12. But I can't really see them wanting to go down that road given kind of the state of the cable business these days.
Perhaps the SEC satellite studios.
There you go.
It's a bureau. It's a bureau.
Yeah. Bob, on that note, on the Longhorn Network, since this is your area of expertise, this is something I never understood. And I got to think it's going to be the best sales jobs in the history of the media business in that the University of Texas convinced ESPN that they had enough content and enough people around the country would want the Longhorn Network to make it profitable for ESPN. But you're in Maine right now, and I doubt that while you're eating a lobster roll, somebody's going, I can't wait to watch the Longhorns later. And I don't understand why that even crossed ESPN's mind.
Yeah, I'm not looking for the Longhorn Network. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to get Amazon Prime on this TV in this rental house I have.
For the NFL
but I
game,
think, yeah, exactly. For the NFL, first Thursday night NFL game on Prime. I think I got it figured out. It was something that was presented to us because we had a long history with Texas on their third tier rights, did some in pay-per-view over the years with Fox Sports Southwest and carried a lot of their products. And, I just couldn't make sense of the numbers. None of us could. And, this was while we had gotten to the business with the Big 12 and, or Big 10 network. And I just didn't get it. And, we looked at it and told the loss, thanks, but no thanks. And, God bless him. He got ESPN to bite on it.
Bob, you mentioned the Amazon NFL game tonight. New territory, the streaming continues to grow in live sports and whatnot. Where do you kind of see this in terms of college football at the moment? I know a lot, and you've seen it, about the pack has been, well, perhaps they swing a streaming deal with Apple or Amazon. Just where do you sort of see those players in the landscape right now, given all the moving parts, not only in college sports, but pro sports as well?
I think it's, this is a very important package between Amazon and the NFL for not just the NFL, but for all the sports. Everybody wants to look and see what it's going to do. Everybody's making ratings projections and estimates. And the one thing I think everybody's hoping for is there's not some technical snafu that creates a huge problem, because that would be probably worse than anything happening. But I think it's important because, look, streaming's not going away. It's getting bigger. And I think it's important for viewers to become more comfortable with streaming and accustomed to streaming because, progress is going to continue to go that way. I don't think any of the leagues or conferences are prepared, although the Pac-12 may be the first, to put their entire package on a streaming service, a la what the MLS has done. And it's going to be interesting to see, in the Pac-12, who's probably got a tougher sell job right now than anybody, how deep they go with the streamer will be very interesting to see. I'd be surprised and shocked if they went 100%. I think it's too early, but I think it is something they're going to have a significant package. I just don't think it would be smart to be the entire package.
Does it help the Pac-12 in negotiating with those Silicon Valley companies that a lot of the alums of those companies are Pac-12 people?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, up and down the West Coast, a lot of those technology companies that, came out of Stanford and Cal and places like that. So that's certainly a benefit. I don't know how much leverage it actually provides, for them against ESPN. I could see how it would provide some, but I also could see the guys back in Bristol going, really, you're going to put all your games on Amazon or Apple? And, for those companies, the rights fees, it's a rounding error. It's just not much money for them. But for the conferences, to lose that kind of exposure is going to be significant. And I mentioned something today about this, and that is, if they do this and they go 100%, half the people are going to say that the conference and the commissioners and the ADs and the presidents are just the worst, ever at what their job is. The other, for taking these games away from, wide distribution. The other half is going to call them brilliant visionaries for going forward with these, with the streaming services. So, no win either way if they go 100%, but they probably should just do somewhere in the middle, put a significant package on the streamers, but also keep some linear television distribution. And hopefully between the two of them, the money will make sense.
The number Brigham Young and Baylor received for a 9:15 Central Time game was $2.4 million, their highest late night for ESPN since 2016. I look at the scores of the games, but I know there's so much more because of all the chatter and whatever's going on out there with TV deals. Does that catch people's attention?
I think it does. I think, it shows what they can pull in that window. And, it was a great game. And I think that the Big 12 is looking pretty good right now for adding BYU in this last round of realignment. So, and it also, I guess, shows you that you don't have to have the West Coast to be able to play in those windows. If you had BYU in a mountain time zone and you had Arizona or Arizona State and, Pacific time zone for, a couple months of the football season and then mountain time zone the third month, and they like to play those late games because it's so hot down there this time of year. There's other schools that can fulfill those windows and not necessarily have to be on the West Coast per se.
Bob, because of kind of what you're referring to there, do you feel like the expanded playoff calms the waters, or do you think they're as choppy as ever in regards to movement, realignment, what have you, that we've been kind of dealing with the last year or two?
I think it's calmed the waters somewhat. I can't imagine that the presidents on the CFP board sat around and, came up with this expanded playoffs, guaranteed path for multiple conferences every year to be in the playoff, and then are going to let their commissioner go around and stab somebody in the back. Right. I just find it hard to believe. It's just especially, when you look at one of the members was the Ohio State president. And, so I think that it's calmed things down. It's probably an uneasy calm, but I think it has calmed things down. It doesn't appear as though the SEC is, chomping at the bit to go any further other than, getting Texas and OU into the fold. And even all the rhetoric around the Big Ten seems to have stabilized a little bit. Now, if the Pac-12 media deal craps out, then, it could be, it wouldn't necessarily be the conferences trying to pick off people. It could be schools within the Pac-12 trying to get out.
What did you think of Brett Yormark's comment about looking to the fourth time zone?
I think it's pretty smart. I'm trying to think of the schools that fit Big 12 wise, and San Diego State's tough for me, but Fresno State works really good. So there's an opportunity. I think Arizona looks good, even though it's only in the fourth time zone part of the year. I think it's enticing, good basketball program, and I think the Big 12 basketball program is going to be one of the best there is. So he's smart. He's pressing all the buttons and trying to figure out a way, if he can, to make the Big 12 truly national in scope. And, Cincinnati and UCF get you out there pretty well on the East Coast, but you probably need something a little further west than BYU to really kind of check off all the boxes on the West Coast.
I was just curious, Bob. I know you got to run, but why are you not so high on San Diego State?
I just think from a culture standpoint, it's a little better fit for the Pac-12 than it is the Big 12.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's a good market, and that whole Southern California, it runs from Santa Barbara all the way to the Mexican border. It's just one giant market in my mind. And so to be able to go down there and to recruit and hit San Diego State and things like that, that I think that's important. But I just think from a fit standpoint, it's a little better with the Pac-12 than it would be for the Big 12. I
would like to see all conferences survive, but my question then is: should this TV deal with the Pac-12 be taking this long?
They always take longer than you think. It was kind of rushed to get started. They triggered the window, I think a little early, but maybe not a lot. There's a lot of moving parts. You had to sit around and wait for the Big Ten deal to get done, and that took longer than everybody thought. So I'm sure they've been working hard. They've also got some, different packages that are probably out there that take a while for people to understand and put a value to. And that's probably with the streamers that might be holding it up a little bit. I can't imagine that for any of the broadcast networks, or cable networks, Fox, ESPN, whoever who's bidding on the Pac-12. I don't believe the holdup's there unless it's just over dollars.
How do you? I know you, and we have you on for so long. The Amazon game tonight. What are you expecting? The NFL is like this massive, giant gorilla, like King Kong of all the viewers. What number are people talking about maybe tonight?
The numbers I've seen thrown around. There was an interesting one. They played each other last year, and it did 18 million. I can't remember if it was a Monday night or a Thursday night, but it did 18 million. Fox averaged about 60 million viewers last year. You got to remember the games are also on over the air in the local market. So the broadcast station in Kansas City and the broadcast station in LA will have the game. I think, anything over 8 or 9 million is going to be pretty good. The last game they did 1 million, their last preseason, and half of that came from the local broadcasters. So I think if you did 8.5 million, and maybe 2.5 of that is from the local TV stations. Kansas City does a huge number locally, so they'll be big. LA, it will be about half the rating, but pretty close in numbers given the size of the market in terms of total viewers. So if you could get like 6.2, 6 million pure prime subscribers watching the game, I think it's a hit. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, it's got to be flawless from a production standpoint, which I'm sure that'll be fine. But from the technology standpoint, there can't be a bunch of lag. People can't be able to get, they got to be able to get on. Don't want to see the buffering window spinning around. So, the other thing is I'm interested to see is some of these alternate feeds. I'm not sure if they're all going to be up this time, but the Dude Perfect feed and the, Manning Cast type feed, those things ought to be pretty interesting to see as well.
You're the best, man. Thanks for your time, Bob, and the insight and knowledge and experience and all of the above. Thank you very much, Bob Thompson, RLT Sports on Twitter, and, of course, former Fox Sports president.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there to